Hey, hello everyone. This is Dr. Joseph Capps here, owner of Capps Christian Counseling, Project Paladin, and our new podcast, Dancing with the Darkness, which we're bringing to you today. If you get on Spotify, you can listen to some of the foundational episodes that kind of lead us up to how I came into doing this podcast and gives you some intimate level of experience as to why I absolutely feel passionately about what I'm discussing with you because it's been a lifelong struggle for myself, and my mission has become to help as many as I can to get over all of the effects of CPTSD and the misdiagnoses and all of the things that I've experienced on my healing journey. And that leads me to the first thing I'd like to do is just ask if you can to support our YouTube channel and our podcast, please like and subscribe. This message is hopefully going to get out there and reach as many people as possible. We're just trying to help folks the best we can. So we went over basically my history up until early 20s to kind of just give you the foundation of where CPTSD really originates. The complex part of it comes from developmental trauma, abuse, different things that have happened as a child. And the reason that's so significant is because it literally wires our brain a certain way, it wires our nervous system a certain way. And so it sets the foundation literally for our life. We did a YouTube channel for a while called Project Paladin, and we talked about the comorbidity of the Paladin community, which are those that are in service to the world, whether it be military, first responders, EMS, whatever. But there was this compelling urge for these individuals to go out into the world and serve selflessly, and a lot of that has to do with things that have happened in their childhood and developed an ideology. I want to start talking about the other part of this, which I have kind of coined the term dancing with the darkness, because that is what it has felt like for me in my life. It's the old adage about the yin and the yang and the light and the dark, and how there's this internal battle all the time. And so the darkness doesn't necessarily mean evil in this case. That's not what I want to connotate. I think that everybody is inherently capable of evil if we allow complete and total darkness to take us over and we lose our humanity. But for many of us, I believe that there is a much higher purpose for this struggle. And that is, we need to be able to walk beside others that are having this struggle, and we need to understand this in a very intimate, personal way. Most of us are not necessarily completely and totally empathic. We may be what they call highly sensitive persons that are very sensitive to our environment, but are very caring. But every now and again, there is a rarity, like myself, where basically, if you looked at an adverse childhood experiences scale, and there's 10 things on there, well, I'm 10 out of 10, and then there's probably another 10 that aren't on that scale. One of the things that I've done with my life's work is I've created the complex trauma profiling system and the trauma discovery protocol, which is a one-of-a-kind measurement that it's taken me over a decade to develop. And the reason why I've done this is because as we start going through this podcast, I'm going to describe probably many of the struggles that you're living with. And a lot of it has to do with misdiagnosis when you go to the doctor, over-medicated. There's lots of things that happen to us over the years as people try to unravel the source of our anxiety or the source of our depression or the reason why we tick the way that we tick. And it's unfortunate because there's a lot of crossover and a lot of misdiagnosis when it comes to CPTSD. And trust me, I know all about it because I've been called everything from borderline to bipolar to generalized anxiety disorder to dysthymic depression. I mean, you name it. It seemed like, they just kept throwing spaghetti at the wall and whatever stuck. That's your diagnosis for today. Another reason why I don't deal with insurance when it comes to helping people, because they want a diagnosis immediately. And that's just not ethical, in my opinion, or moral, because it takes 6 months to a year to even begin to understand what's going on in mental health with a person. And you have to look at all of the factors, environmental being a huge one, nutrition being a huge one, sleep being a huge one. And so enough of the introduction. I just want to give you a feel for who I am and what I'm trying to do. And what we're going to do with this podcast is there's not going to be necessarily a rhyme or a reason to it. There's not necessarily going to be this defined structure, because I really want this to be fluid and I want it to be real and raw. Okay. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and shout out to everyone that there is a trigger warning here. Okay. There's going to be things that I talk about that I've been through or that I continue to go through that cause emotional flashbacks and all of these other wonderful goodies that we get to deal with CPTSD. And so I want to make sure that if you're sensitive to that, whether it be physical, psychological, or sexual abuse, or traumatic relationships, or images, or gore, or things that we've seen, I want to make sure that you're aware that these things are present in these podcasts, and I want you to have fair warning, okay, to listen at your own risk, but also I would advise that you have some sort of support system in place, because with CPTSD, we do have triggers that continue to reveal themselves over the years. We may not necessarily have defined triggers, but we also have emotional flashbacks that can happen, which are very difficult, because approaching 50 years of age, I still have these, and so I understand. The difference is that hopefully over a series of months with this podcast, we're going to be able to give you some really solid coping skills and strategies. We're going to be able to give you some very good psychoeducation and knowledge about why you feel the way that you do and why you tick the way that you tick. And we're going to continue to talk about the protocol, because the protocol literally is a template. It is literally a profile of your life from childhood up to adult, and it easily defines where the major crisis areas and triggers and emotional flashbacks are coming from. Giving counselors, therapists, and others the benefit of the doubt, we are limited. It's no different from fixing a car. If somebody comes in and they give you very vague symptoms, it's going to be very hard to diagnose the vehicle's problem. Well, a human is even more complex, okay, because God created us. We didn't, this is beyond our human understanding. The more we learn, the more we need to learn, is basically the best way to define that. And so the protocol is designed 100% to pinpoint these things quicker. So it's not only beneficial to a client, but it's also beneficial to other therapists. I have therapists that are using the protocol, and it's helping them tremendously because it gives them areas of focus. It also will help you understand what treatments based on the parts of the brain that are being affected are going to work. It's also going to help you understand nutrition and sleep and all of these things, and why all of this is comorbid in itself. Okay. And so if you have questions about that, you can email me at drjcobs@kepschristiancounseling.com. Be more than happy to describe, give you a synopsis of what that looks like if you're a therapist or a client that's watching this. And so, like I said, we're going to make this very fluid. This is going to be basically our first official episode of Dancing with the Darkness as far as adulthood. It's not going to be historical like we did with the first podcast to give you a background, but this is going to be actual life with CPTSD, what it looks like for me, the challenges that I face, and the real life, tangible, and effective strategies that I use to not only survive, but to thrive with this, and to ultimately put it into a very positive narrative so that hopefully I'm helping someone out there that's watching this video. That's the whole reason that I do this. The ultimate healing becomes when we can take our life and we can turn it into something positive and we can use it to help others. And so today I wanted to talk about something that has re-fostered its grip in my life. And this has been a challenge for me for as long as I can remember. And it's shame, okay? And in particular, I want to talk about toxic shame. And then I'm going to throw a little tidbit in there that a lot of people may not know, and I don't see a lot of talk about it, okay? So it's going to be interesting. And I'm going to tell you why we have so much trouble with toxic shame. So anyone can get on the internet and they can look up toxic shame and they can find a very vague and generic explanation that everybody is going to say that we know is fact, okay? And it didn't necessarily take Dr. Bessel van der Kolk and his work with developmental trauma to figure this out. It's been something that's been toyed with all the way since Freud and Jung and all of the early psychologists, okay? And so it comes from childhood and development when we either have an absent parent or a parent that neglects our needs, or we have an abusive parent. And so your shame, we can call it shame, and we can make it this big broad net that catches all of the fish. But that's not really an effective strategy for dealing with this, because we need to understand, you know, the number one premise of CAPS Christian Counseling, my private practice, is that every single person is an individual, okay? I believe as a man of faith that we were crafted a certain way and that none of us are the same. Not only, you know, do we define that with fingerprinting when it comes in the cases of law enforcement, but we also know that our temperament, our inborn, is not the same as anybody else's, okay? We are 100% and completely and totally unique. Now, do we have similarities? Do we have personalities that can be the same? Do we have attributes that can be the same? Certainly. And that's because they are behavioral things that we do based on environment and based on trauma, okay? And so we need to understand that, okay? They can also be based on chemical imbalances, okay? And let me tell you, people aren't born with this magical chemical imbalance, okay? This literally is manipulated, and it's manipulated through genetics. We call it epigenesis. We call it basically, you know, in faith circles, we call it the family curse, whatever you want to call it. And so what does this look like? It looks like, you know, literally the gene structure and your cellular structure being different from the person next to you, okay? So if your parent has PTSD, then you are more likely to be susceptible to it, okay? You're going to be more sensitive to anxiety and different things, okay? But not only that at the genetic level, but you're also going to be predisposed based on that parent's actions towards you as you're developing. Okay, so we are not going to villainize people's parents. We're not going to villainize any of this, because at the end of the day, we need to understand that most people are not evil. Most people are a product of what happened to them. And the difference is they are never taught to cope. They are never taught how to heal. They are never given the skills. And so they do the very best that they can. And they hope and pray every day that they are a better parent to their children, okay? And I know this because that is how I started as a parent, was that it was all about, please God, help me to not be like my mother or like my father. And guess what? There's genetic factors in there. There's reflexive thoughts. There's reflexive behaviors that manifested themselves. Now, am I a better parent? Absolutely. Absolutely, okay? But am I a perfect parent? No, and none of us are. Okay, and so our hope has to be that as we restore and as we heal, we do our very best to instill that part of it into our children so that they can go on to be a healthier version of the genetic pool that we have formed. Okay, and so when it comes to shame, I want to talk about two things in particular. The toxic part is either driven by us feeling inherently worthless, us inherently feeling like we're never good enough, or we can never succeed, or we can never be what we need to be. And this can come not only from neglect, it can come not only from parents being very volatile and their reactions, but it also comes from us having basically an environment where we do not understand what emotions are supposed to look like. We don't know how to manage those. So it's basically dysregulated, okay? Many times we find ourselves willing to take punishment, willing to take pain, willing to take abuse, even just to be close to the caregiver because we so desperately have the need to be loved and nurtured as a child because you are innocent. And this doesn't go away as an adult. We have the same fundamental temperament needs as an adult. And so when we're talking about toxic shame, we need to understand where it originates. We also need to understand that shame is put on us by others and it's put on us by ourselves. If you're watching this and you're a person of faith, if you believe in a higher power, well, a higher power will convict us. It will, my God that I believe in gives me instances where I feel instantly that I've done something wrong and I have the ability to fix it. And it's more of a discipline. It's more of a discipline out of love. Hey, you know that what you just said or did is wrong. You need to make it better. And I'm able to make it better and I'm able to correct. And it becomes a positive learning experience. And the other thing is that when you're convicted and you have the ability to make it right and you make it right, well, guess what? That doesn't turn into guilt and it doesn't turn into shame because that's not the point of conviction. Now, guilt and shame is brought on by starting from childhood, behaviors from our parents that inherently make us worthless. So some of the examples that I can, you repress a lot, you forget a lot, but some of the examples that I can remember to this day is both of my parents several times reminding me that the whole reason they got pregnant and they decided to have a child was they felt it would save their marriage, right? And so obviously they were divorcing before I was even born. And so by them bringing that up, you cannot help but have a sense of failure. As soon as you start having cognitive abilities, you start to equate the fact that, I'm a failure because I was meant to save their marriage. And then you find out other things, like how your mother wanted to abort you, but your father is Catholic and he didn't believe in it. And so, they wouldn't do an abortion, but yet she's doing everything she can. And she knew what she was doing because she's a nurse. Okay. So she knew, working in hospitals and working with kids and working with prenatal, she knew the things that you don't do to have a healthy pregnancy, and she did those. Drinking and smoking and all of these things, okay? And so these things can become toxic for us because we start to take ownership of them and we start to feel like, okay, well, why am I alive in the first place, right? They tried to take me out and I'm here and now I'm suffering, okay? Because you have a mixture of two types of parents, two types of abuse. I'm not going to go into it in detail. You can listen to the earlier episodes and you'll get what I'm talking about. But the whole point is this is how we're forming the toxic shame and guilt. Okay. And so this goes into adulthood. Okay. And so let me tell you some recent examples of how this can reintroduce itself. Okay. As an empath, especially if you're empathic like I am, we really feel other people's stuff and we feel it so deeply that it affects us. Okay. And so guess what? Toxic shame and guilt can come right in there. Okay. Because now we start feeling that the reason why the person that's across from us that we're close to, the reason why they're feeling that way has something to do with us, right? We are failing. We are failing to make them happy or meet their needs or whatever, right? We've done something wrong. And so now we've affected them. And so now we have shame and guilt on top of feeling their feelings. Now we have our own shame and guilt. Okay. So once again, I'm a failure. I'm worthless. I'm not fulfilling whatever purpose or whatever set of expectations that I'm supposed to have. Okay. And so it's a vicious cycle that continues on. And sometimes we end up hurting people around us that do actually care about us because it hurts them to hear how bad we loathe ourselves and how bad we feel about ourselves and our own self-esteem and how we don't feel good enough. It can actually hurt other people around you. And so can become more conscious of that as we heal and restore. You will be more conscious of that. And it's simple because one of the things that we're going to talk about in this podcast is that we have to break free from toxic people. We have an inherent comfort and desire to be with these people because it's familiar and it's what we feel like we deserve. And so as long as we're in those environments, it's very difficult to really fully restore and heal, okay? Because we continue to be around narcissistic behavior, covert narcissistic behavior, whatever. Just people that have the ability to manipulate and foster that guilt and shame and keep that fire burning, okay? And so we need to be conscious of that. So I'm just going to give you a couple quick examples that were very recent and how there's like a little door and shame is knocking on the door. And so earlier episodes in the podcast, you know my relationship with my father. You know that, I've tried to do the right thing. My brothers did not do the right thing. Unfortunately, 2 of them are gone. One of them is living. One is left that is in bad shape. And so he at least talks to our father. But for me, I tried to do the right thing and not have regret. And I moved him up to where I live, moved him close, because he was all alone. He was a product of his own treatment of other people, and so he ended up alone. And so, there may have been some false sense of responsibility there, some false sense of guilt and shame there that I was obligated to do it. But I've turned that into a more healthy thing, and basically what I'm trying to do is show my children, especially my son, that this is the right thing to do, okay? And that I need to look past the pain and I need to forgive. And he is by no means the person that he was. He's an elderly man that has become very soft, very sensitive. And honestly, I believe it is who he really is on the inside. And I've grown to love that man. And I've grown to forgive all of the things that happened to me as a kid because I know that he was acting based on what he was taught, the example he was shown in the household he was in, and he did the very best he could. And he never did anything out of maliciousness or evil. That does not excuse behavior, okay? And it does not negate the fact that it has shaped and formed who I am and been a major contributor to my life struggles, okay? But we can also flip the script and we can also say that it is a major contributor to my healing and to my understanding, and now my ability to hopefully educate and treat and help others that are still struggling with that, okay? And so, I call him 3 days a week, visit when I can, and try to keep check on him the best I can. So last night at some point, or yesterday, he had an episode and he collapsed and he had to crawl to his phone, and I got a call early in the morning and that he was in the hospital. And so this is how shame and guilt looks. Okay, this is how it knocks on the door and it tries to jump into your life. Immediately that tried to come in to my heart and into my mind that, hey, if you were a better son, if you would have had your phone on, if you would have, could have, should have, would have, right? And so that's how we ruminate on this, and that's how shame and guilt comes in, and our brain can't process it because it's not based on fact, it's based on theory, it's based on speculation, okay? And so that's the immediate gut feeling that I have, is that him collapsing, him having an episode, him being in the hospital, all of these circumstances are my fault because I shoulda, coulda, woulda, okay? But that's nonsense. There's no evidence that supports that belief. If we were going to do a little bit of cognitive behavioral therapy right now on ourselves, there's no evidence that supports that belief. I'm doing the very best that I can as his son. He wants to remain independent. He wants to stay in his own place. He refuses to go live in assisted living or anything else. That's his choice, okay? So that's not on me, okay? And I need to understand that I'm doing the very best that I can. I'm loving for him. I'm supporting him. I'm doing everything I can humanly possible to be there for him, okay? And so I need to push away the negative self-talk and bring in the positive self-talk and get it on a level playing field and understand that this shame and guilt is not only toxic, but it's also false. Okay? And so these are just little examples of things that can set that off that we have to be conscious of, because I could easily spiral. I could easily go into a pity party, whatever. Okay. And then that's going to affect everyone else around me. It's going to affect my ability, right, to get on here and do a podcast, right? Because I'm down in the dumps and I can't help anyone or witness to anyone or support anyone if I can't get out of my own funk. Okay. And so I just wanted to give you that quick example of how that happens. Another way is like in my civilian job, my work job, they have this, I'm in a supervisory role and all of these text streams come across, and you have an individual that decides he's not going to work for a couple days. Okay. And so now we have a boat that's floating with a big hole in it and it's going to sink. And so because of shame and guilt and this inherent sense of responsibility and accountability that I've put on myself, that immediately becomes my problem, right? It not only becomes my problem that this guy is out, but now it's my problem to plug this boat. Okay, well, guess what? That's not healthy either, and that's not based on evidence or fact. I have superiors that have much more accountability and have much more responsibility and authority than I do. Okay, so it is not my responsibility to do that. All I can do is contribute at my level in the company to negate the consequences of that. And what does that look like? It's going to mean I get my people and myself to contribute across the board to try to cover that person's absence. So expectations are not going to be met. Goals are not going to be met because it's not possible. You can't just take away a percentage of your workforce and then expect it to go on like normal, because if it did, then you wouldn't need that person in the first place. Okay. And so these are logical, reasonable things that I have to tell myself over and over again, or that false sense of guilt and shame will come in. I want to end this video with giving you food for thought. Okay. For those of you that are sciencey, if you're a therapist watching this, you'll really understand it. For those of you that don't, I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. But we have a nervous system. We have what's called a sympathetic and a parasympathetic. Okay, the sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight. Okay, we are ready to roll based on any kind of stimuli that is considered a threat. Our parasympathetic, which is known as rest and digest, is our ability to calm back down. Okay, well, this is where it gets very tricky with shame, because shame can actually be a place of comfort for us. It can actually become a safe place for us, and it can actually be part of the parasympathetic nervous system. And so I'm telling you this because I want you to understand why it's so hard. This is why standalone therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure therapy, there's all kinds of things, EMDR, there's all of these great therapies, but they don't work 100% standalone for every client. And the reason why is because we need to understand that sometimes if you've had severe reoccurring abuse that has caused shame and guilt, especially the toxic shame, we need to understand that shame can actually be a betrayer, because it becomes part of your parasympathetic system. You literally go into the self-loathing and shame, and it becomes part of you ramping down out of the fight and flight. Okay, and so when our system and our brain, and this is all part of what we call polyvagal theory. We have the dorsal and the ventral vagal nerve, which is real sciencey, but they each do a particular thing. And so when this happens, when our shame is based in an area where it's our safe place and it's our go-to to literally self-comfort, okay, if I put all of this on myself, it's all my fault, I'm the bad guy, and I just sit here and I hate myself, it literally becomes less stressful than the stimuli that's out there, if that makes sense, okay? And so this is a betrayal of our nervous system. And so this is part of what CPTSD does. This is part of what I hope to unveil with this podcast, is to give you knowledge first to understand who you are and how you got there, because you can't heal until you do. But also to give you some tangible, real coping strategies and some real abilities to conquer these things, and literally to have enough love and compassion for yourself to realize that it's okay for you to get some help with this, because it's really, really hard to do it on your own. Okay, so when it becomes part of your safety to embellish on the shame and the guilt, it's much more difficult to deal with. And it's because now we're not only dealing with the chemical or the visceral reaction in our brain, which we can counteract with some, measures to help our nervous system regulate, but we're also dealing with the fact that we have a very rigid, very clear and rigid, crisp set of thoughts that go through the frontal part of the brain, that we logically and empirically believe are true. Okay, and so it becomes a twofold battle to deal with the shame and the guilt. I want to thank you so much for listening today. Please comment, share, like our podcast, subscribe. If this spoke to you, I would love to get a comment. We're only here to help. Questions, comments, concerns are always open here. And we're looking forward to next time. Thanks again.